Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the soft hush of a nearly empty train station, where the fluorescent lights flicker like tired stars, and the smell of rain clings to everything, the benches, the metal railings, even your coat. You're 17 and something is about to change forever. Not in the dramatic way movies like to show it. There's no slow motion running, no music swelling, just you, standing on a platform in the wrong town on the right day, holding a paperback you haven't really read, with a return ticket that doesn't feel urgent, that he shows up in the most unremarkable way. That's how these stories always begin, right? The extraordinary disguised as ordinary. He asks for the time, even though there's a giant clock above you both. You say it's 6:42 p.m. He smiles like you've handed him something sacred. You probably won't survive this one, just so you know. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing who's drifting off with me from which corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You weren't supposed to be at that station. You were visiting your aunt, but she missed her own train that morning, so you decided to explore the nearby town alone. You wandered into a dusty bookshop, bought a copy of Human Bondage without really knowing why, and ended up on a bench by track 3, watching pigeons fight over crusts of bread. That's when he arrived. He looked like someone out of time, old coat, hair falling into his eyes, a backpack slung over one shoulder that looked more patched than packed. You noticed him because he didn't rush like everyone else. He moved like he was listening to music only he could hear. When he asked for the time, you thought, this is how ridiculous stories start. But instead, you just shrugged and said, 6:42. He said, do you think trains ever feel guilty for being late? You blinked, and then, without even meaning to, you said, maybe only the ones who know they're being waited for. He sat next to you. Just like that. He told you he was leaving for France soon, some kind of summer volunteer thing, digging trenches at historical sites. It sounds noble, he said. But really, I just want to get away from this version of me. You knew exactly what he meant. That age when the person in the mirror doesn't match the person behind your ribs. You shared stories in the space between trains, favorite childhood hiding spots, what you'd name your future cat, the food you pretended to like because someone you loved once cooked it. Somewhere in the middle of a joke about the snack cart looking haunted, he said, my birthday's always the day after Bastille Day. Easy to remember, right? Every year, same time, same day, same station. You asked him, why are you telling me that? And he smiled. One of those tired, hopeful smiles that live too close to the eyes. Because I'm going to come back, and maybe you'll be here. You laughed. Maybe I will. You gave him your name. He gave you his. You repeated it in your head like a prayer you weren't ready to forget. The train came. He boarded. No dramatic goodbyes. Just a wave through a fogged-up window, and a feeling in your chest like a skipped heartbeat that never landed. You went home, but you remembered. And the next year, on his birthday, you found yourself back at that station. Same bench, same paperback, even though you hadn't heard a word from him. You didn't know if he remembered. But you waited. The second year, he came. Not right away, not on time, but there he was. Taller somehow, or maybe just less boyish. He had sunburn across his nose and letters in his pocket. You didn't ask for promises. You just spent the afternoon talking, drinking vending machine coffee, laughing too loudly, telling the kind of truths that only make sense between people who see each other once a year. And so it began. A tradition, a thread. You didn't see him for the rest of the year. No texts, no calls, just that one day, that one promise. You'd wonder. Of course, you'd walk past people who wore the same cologne. You'd hear a song and think, he'd hate this. You even wrote his name in a library book once, just to make it feel more permanent. Every July 15th, you returned. Sometimes he did too. Sometimes he didn't. But you came anyway. Even when your parents called it a phase. Even when your friends stopped asking. Even when the station changed and the vending machine got replaced and they took out the old clock above the bench, you kept coming, because something about love, especially the strange, half-lived, once-a-year kind, makes it easy to believe in magic, even when life tries to dull it out of you. And besides, there's an old Irish superstition that says, if someone enters your life by accident but keeps showing up, It was never really an accident. So you waited, because how could it have been? The first year he didn't come, it rained, not the polite kind of summer drizzle that fades into the sidewalk, but a stubborn, sideways downpour that soaked through your jacket and turned the paperback you brought of human bondage, always that book, into a bloated sponge. You thought about leaving, thought about not returning the next year, but that's the thing about rituals. Once they sink into your bones, they don't ask for logic. You waited 5 hours that day. He never showed. You didn't cry. You just went home, turned off your phone, and watched the condensation gather along the bottom of your bedroom window like it had something important to say. The next day you got a letter, not an email, not a text, a real letter, folded in thirds, addressed in his handwriting, postmarked 2 weeks earlier. It said he had to cancel at the last minute. His grandmother had fallen ill. He was stuck in Lyon. There were delays and guilt and apologies, and a sketch of a clock with the hands melted like in a Dali painting. You held that letter like it was something fragile and alive. And you forgave him, even though he hadn't asked for forgiveness. You wrote back, even though you had no return address. There's something beautifully foolish about writing to someone with nowhere to send it, like shouting "I love you" into a canyon and pretending the echo is them saying it back. You tucked the letter under your pillow. You started keeping a shoebox. It would grow so full over the years. The next time you saw him, he looked older. He had a scar on his temple. You didn't ask, he told you anyway. Something about a bicycle crash in a coastal town when no one spoke English. He said he thought of you as he bled on the sidewalk, because he remembered your voice saying, "You've always struck me as someone who bruises romantically." You had no memory of saying that, but it sounded like you. That year, he brought you a book in French, a love story about a couple who only ever meet in train stations. "It's awful," he said, "but I thought of us." You laughed and pretended your hands weren't shaking when you took it. You told yourself not to hope, but hope, like ivy, doesn't need permission. It climbs over everything. You only had 4 hours that time, but they were full of smiles that lasted too long, of silences that didn't ask to be filled, of the way he looked at you like he was still trying to memorize your face. You didn't kiss, you never did. Isn't that the strangest part? Over all those years, all those meetings, you never kissed, never made it anything official. Nothing claimed, nothing ruined. Psychologists still wonder if unspoken love is more enduring than spoken. If what we don't say lasts longer because it isn't weighed down by reality. You wonder that too. Often. You saw him for years in a row, then he missed. Another. No letter. This time, you showed up anyway, sat with your book, your umbrella, the thermos he gave you on year 2, the scarf he left behind one summer. When it got too hot, you carried it all with you, and people began to notice. The station staff, other passengers, strangers on the platform. They started to ask softly, politely, curiously, "Are you waiting for someone?" You always answered the same way. Yes. They'd nod, not prying further, because something in your voice told them not to. One elderly woman sat beside you once and handed you a pear. She said, "I waited till he came back with a limp and a new wife." You thanked her, ate the pear, and never forgot her. There's something about train stations. They attract stories. Hellos and goodbyes. Yes, but also the almosts, the might-haves, the should-have-bins. You could write a book about that platform. Maybe someday, you will. The year you turned 30, you dyed your hair red. You told no one, but a small part of you wanted him to see it. He didn't show that year either. You watched the pigeons, now older than the ones from your teenage years. Or maybe it just felt that way. You listened to the announcements. The voices had changed. No more human conductors, just automated ones now. Even the clocks were digital. But you remained analog. You wrote a letter to him on a napkin, left it in the crook of the bench's armrest. It said, "Today, someone asked if you were real." I told them yes. Because I still believe it. You don't know if he ever found it. Maybe some teenager did and laughed. Or maybe the wind carried it off like some lost page from a love story that never knew how to end. Did you know the longest recorded wait for a missed-date was by a man in China who waited 10 days at an airport for a woman who never arrived? His story went viral. He didn't eat, he slept in a plastic chair. When asked why, he simply said, "She said she'd come." Some laughed, others cried. But you understood. Because sometimes belief is a stubborn candle, and even the rain can't put it out. That's what love is. Sometimes a rain-soaked paperback, a scarf with someone else's scent, a date you mark every year, whether it's met or not, a platform that feels more like home than your own house. You became known. Locals whispered about you, the woman with the red umbrella, they called you. Even when it wasn't raining, you began to lean into it. You wore the same coat, sat in the same spot, read the same book, now taped together like an old map. And every July 15th, whether or not he came, you smiled at strangers. You gave advice on train routes. You helped tourists with photos. Because part of you knew if he ever did return, you'd want him to find you exactly where he left you, even if everything else had changed. You start arriving earlier now, not just by hours, but by days. At first, it's one day early just to settle in. You tell yourself to feel the station again, to let it wrap around you like a shawl made of footsteps, suitcase wheels, and soft echoes of other people's goodbyes. Then it becomes 2 days, then 3. It's not anticipation exactly, it's more like longing's quieter cousin presence. The act of being there, even if no one else is. You rent a room above the bakery across from the station. The scent of warm baguettes and apricot jam seeps through the walls each morning. The owner, Madame Claire, has stopped asking why you're in town. She simply says, "Your room is ready," and leaves fresh towels folded like swans. One evening, she brings up a bottle of white wine and 2 glasses. You sip slowly, watching the light shift on the old plaster walls. She doesn't say much, but before leaving she looks at you and says, "He's either the luckiest man or the greatest fool." You don't correct her. Some truths don't need sharpening. That year, the weather is perfect, warm with a breeze that plays with the hem of your skirt and the edges of your memories. And then, on the day July 15th, you walk to the station at sunrise. You sit. You wait. You read 3 chapters of Human Bondage. Copy now so worn it smells like memory and vanilla. And then you see him. At first it doesn't feel real. He looks different. His hair is silver at the temples now. His posture carries a softness, like something heavy has finally been set down. He's wearing the scarf, your scarf, the one you gave him in year 2 when his fingers were cold and you still believed in signs. Your breath catches, but you don't stand. He sees you, smiles, walks over, sits. Neither of you speaks for a moment. Then he says, "I came last year. You weren't here." You blink. "I came 3 days late." He nods, as if that makes perfect sense, as if fate had to misfire once, just to keep the story interesting. "I waited an hour," he says. You laugh, but there's something wet at the corner of your eye. "Amateur," you whisper. He grins, and for the first time in years, the waiting feels worth it. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet, complete. Somewhere near platform 3, a couple is arguing gently over where to eat lunch. A child is blowing soap bubbles from a tiny wand. A pigeon lands on the bench and looks at you like it knows. You ask him, "So, what now?" And he says, "We can keep meeting, if you want. Or we can stop pretending this is all we're meant for." You look at your hands, at the tiny flecks of ink on your fingertips from the letter you wrote last night. The one that started, "In case you don't show again, I want you to know." You didn't bring it with you. You were ready, either way. "Let's meet," you say, "somewhere that isn't a train station." He nods. "Deal." And just like that, the ritual shifts. That night, you walk him to the hotel. The streets are wet from a recent shower, and your reflections trail behind. You like ghosts with better posture. He tells you about his years, the time he lived on a houseboat in Amsterdam, the woman he almost married but didn't, the month he went silent not just with you, but with everyone, and how he sat in the woods for 3 days with no shoes. You tell him about your teaching job, about your apartment filled with plants you talked to, about the letters you wrote and never mailed. He asks, "Do you still have them?" You nod. "Can I read one?" You hesitate, then say, "Only the one where I got mad." He smiles. "Definitely that one." Did you know that in the Victorian era, people used to send blank calling cards to express romantic interest? No name, no message, just a piece of fine cardstock. If the recipient kept it, that was a yes. If they returned it, a no. You sometimes wish love were still that simple, but then again, maybe it never was. Maybe we've always been complicated creatures with tangled hearts and strange ways of saying, "I missed you." The next day, he leaves, but not before writing his number on the back of your train ticket stub. You don't text him immediately. You wait 2 days, then you send just a photo, the bench, his scarf, folded neatly, and the words, "Next year, same place, but I'm bringing tea." He replies with one word, "Deal." You're not foolish anymore. Or maybe you are, but you're comfortable with it. You still go to the station, even when he isn't there, even when he is. You go because it's where you first believed in something again. And that belief, however old or battered or rained on, is still the best part of you. 1 year, he brings a guitar. Plays softly. You hum along terribly. He records it. You pretend not to notice. Later, he texts you a link to a private video with the title, "The Woman with the Red Umbrella Sings Kinda." You watch it once, then never again. Some things are best held like snowflakes, admired, then let go. A tourist asks if you're part of a performance piece. You say, "Aren't we all?" She laughs, takes your photo. Somewhere, you exist in a stranger's vacation album, labeled "Mysterious Woman with a Book." And honestly, you kind of love that. You never set an alarm anymore. Your body just knows. Every year, a few days before July 15th, you begin waking up at the same quiet hour before the sun, before the sparrows start their hopeful chatter. There's a softness to these early mornings, like time itself is still stretching, unsure of its shape. You sit up, brush sleep from your skin, and start packing with the same reverence someone might prepare for a pilgrimage. Because that's what this is, a gentle, recurring journey to the place where your heart remembers how to listen. You've lost count of how many times you've come now. You think it's 8, maybe 9. The scarves you once wrapped around your neck are now used to tie your hair. You've traded paperbacks for hardcovers, then back again. Some years you wore perfume, some grief, but each year, he came. Except once. The year his father passed, he sent a letter instead. Not a text, not a call, a letter, written in blocky, careful handwriting you knew immediately. Folded 4 times, scentless quiet. It said, simply, "I won't make it this year, but I'm imagining you on the bench, and I'm smiling." You kept that letter in your coat pocket for months. It became frayed at the edges, like something alive. That was also the year you brought a birthday candle, just one. You lit it, whispered his name into the flame, and let it burn down on the bench, cupped by your hand against the breeze. No one else noticed, or maybe they did, and were kind enough to pretend otherwise. Did you know that during World War II, lovers would write entire letters in code acrostics, invisible ink, even Morse tapped through walls just to say, "I miss you"? People have always found ways to speak when the world tried to silence them. You sometimes think about writing to him in code, just for fun, but you're both older now. The games are gentler, the truths quieter. You meet in person more often now, not just in the train station, but in cities halfway between. Paris, Lyon, a quiet village by the sea, where the fish market smells like childhood. But you always return here. It's not about the place, not really. It's about the ritual, the sacred act of keeping a promise to no one but yourselves. Some years, you stay longer. You watch the people, invent little stories in your head. That woman in the blue dress, secret opera singer. The man with 2 phones and no smile, probably a wizard disguised as an accountant. You imagine what others see when they look at you. That woman again, always with a book, always waiting. And maybe you are waiting, but not for him anymore. You're waiting for the version of yourself that only appears here. The one who believes. One afternoon, you sit on the bench early, hours early. You're sipping cold coffee from a paper cup when a young girl with braids and scuffed shoes asks if she can sit beside you. You nod, she swings her legs and hums a song you don't recognize. "Are you waiting for someone?" she asks. You smile. "Always." She tilts her head. "Are they coming?" "Maybe." She nods, as if this is the most reasonable answer in the world. Then she says, "My grandpa says the people we wait for are never late, just arriving at the right story." You look at her. Your grandpa sounds wise. She shrugs. He watches a lot of TV, and then she hops down, waves, and disappears into the crowd. You're left holding her echo, and strangely, it keeps you warm. He arrives, a little late this year. You don't mind. When he walks toward you, something feels different, not wrong, just changed. He sits beside you, hands tucked in his coat pockets, smiles the small smile he saves for you. You okay? You ask. He nods, then says nothing. You wait. Eventually he says, I brought something. You raise an eyebrow. A puppy. He shakes his head, then laughs. Not that kind of something. From his pocket, he pulls out a small, worn notebook. Black leather, faded corners, a red elastic band barely holding it shut. You recognize it instantly. His travel journal. The one he carried everywhere, never letting anyone peek inside. He places it in your lap. I want you to read it, he says. Not now, but soon. You touch the cover like it might flinch. Are you sure? I'm tired of carrying all these words alone. He says it gently, but it lands hard. The space between you shifts. Not wider, deeper. There's a word in Japanese, natsukashi, that doesn't quite translate. It means the happy sadness of nostalgia. The warmth of remembering something you can't relive. You feel that word wrap around you as you hold the journal. You nod. I'll read it. When the time is right, he smiles. That's all I wanted. That night, you share a meal. Simple. Fresh bread, soft cheese, tomatoes still warm from the afternoon sun. You talk, but mostly you sit, and that, you realize, is love too. Not the fireworks, the quiet endurance, the staying. A boy plays violin across the street. The melody is slightly off-key, but he plays with his whole heart. You tip him a few coins, and he bows so deeply his glasses nearly fall off. You tell your friend, that's what I want my life to feel like. He asks, what? And you say, that boy, off-key, but full of heart. He nods. And in his eyes, you see it. Agreement, admiration, something very close to awe. You walk to the station together one last time that week. A woman stops you both and asks, can I take your photo? You two look like a story. You look at him. He looks at you, and you say, we are. She clicks, says, thank you, and disappears into the tide of passengers. You don't ask for the photo. You don't need to, because this moment will live in your spine, your smile, the curve of your laughter, long after any image fades. On the way back to your room, you tuck the notebook into your bag, and you know next year, if he doesn't come, you'll still come. Not for him, for you, because waiting can be an act of love too. Because some benches are more than wood and metal, they're altars. The train station is quieter this year. Quieter in that way only people who return to the same place often can notice. Like the walls have forgotten how to echo, or the pigeons have rearranged their arguments. Even the familiar creak of the old billboard above track 3 seems gentler, like it's whispering rather than calling. You arrive a little later than usual on purpose, not because you're uncertain, but because you've finally accepted that nothing here will start without you. This place, this ritual, this story, it waits with you, not for you. You wear something simple, cotton blouse, loose slacks, the scarf he once said made you look like a librarian in a French film. Your shoes are scuffed, your heart's soft. The bench is empty when you arrive. Good. You sit and let the air settle around you. Let the weight of the bag at your side remind you what you brought, his notebook. You still haven't opened it, not because you're afraid of the contents, but because some things feel like fire, beautiful, warm, but demanding presence. You don't want to skim a life that deserves to be savored. You rest your hand on the journal and wait. And this year, he doesn't come. There's a particular ache in that realization. Not a sharp sting, but something slower. The ache of when a song fades and you're not ready for the silence. You sit with it, noticing how your body reacts, how your hands clench slightly, how your shoulders lift in preemptive grief, then fall again. You reach for your coffee. It's gone cold. You don't mind. Cold coffee and unanswered arrivals are part of the ritual now. Still, a small part of you wonders, why not this year? He didn't call, didn't write, and yet, strangely, you're not angry. There's no betrayal here, only a shift, a turning of the page. Do you know that in Korean, there's a phrase, goiri wohara, which means to miss someone so much, your heart physically aches, but in a tender way, not painful like a wound, more like an echo that fills the empty places with memory. You feel that now. It's not an emergency, not a heartbreak, just the presence of absence. It hums beside you as you finally slide the notebook into your lap. You hesitate, then you open to the first page, and there it is, his handwriting, his voice in ink. I never told you this, but the first time I saw you, you were reading a book about ghosts, and I thought, Of course she believes in things that linger. You smile. He always knew how to begin. You spend the entire afternoon reading. Each page is a whisper from another year. His thoughts while waiting on platforms. His quiet panic the first time you didn't show up, you had the flu. His joy the first time you kissed him on the cheek before boarding your train home. One page simply says, I think, I love her. You stop there, let the words breathe, then turn the page. There's a photo tucked inside. It's not of you, it's of the bench. Empty. Just the bench. Captured in a moment of stillness. The image is slightly blurry, like it was taken in a rush. But the intention is clear. This wasn't about you and him. It was about what existed between you. The invisible string. You get a message that night. Short, simple. Did you read it? You reply, I did. I think I love you too. Then, but I think I loved the version of us that only exists on that bench more. A few minutes pass. Then, I know. Me too. You smile. And for the first time, you realize it's okay if this is the end of that chapter. Love, after all, doesn't always need a sequel. Sometimes, just one book is enough. There's a saying from the 1800s, when people still wrote letters that crossed the oceans, only the sea separates us, not the love. You always liked that. Now, you adapt it. Only time separates us, not the story. Because you'll carry this story for years, in the way you notice strangers reading alone, in the scent of train stations, on the quiet resistance of waiting, even when no one's coming. You return to the bench one last time before you leave. You place the notebook underneath it, wrapped in a clear sleeve, tucked beside the metal leg. No note, no label, just left there like a treasure or a dare. Maybe someone will find it, maybe no one will, but you like the idea of a stranger reading it someday, of wondering who she was, who he was, and maybe thinking, I hope they found their ending. You step onto the train. It hisses like an old animal preparing to dream. As the platform slides past your window, you don't cry, you smile, because this is what love does when it's done right. It lingers, not as pain, but as presence, like a warm coat or an old song. You close your eyes and let the journey carry you forward. You don't know where it ends, but you know how it began, on a bench, with a promise, and the kind of hope that always shows up.